Hey, what's going on? We should be live, but it doesn't seem like we're actually live. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. There's a little bit of a lag, so the reason I was quiet is because I'm looking at the screen for the actual live broadcast to begin, and it was taking a while, but yeah, how's everybody doing? Hope everyone's fine. Hope everyone's life is treating them good. We have 6 people so far, so we should have 6 likes. I am hitting the ground running. I'm trying to be a better YouTuber. I'm trying to shill harder. I'm going to shill hard into 2024. I'm going to be asking for likes. I'm going to be holding the podcast hostage for likes. I'm just going to suspend the stream midstream. If we don't get likes, I'm going to harangue and harass for likes. Yes, I'm stepping my shill game up. iSound info. Hit the Venmo or Cash App at Champagne Sharks. PayPal, champagnesharks@gmail.com. Become a patron at patreon.com/Champagne Sharks. It's a new era of shilling. Gonna shill hard. I saw this lady. She did this thing. She wouldn't let her video be rewindable. I didn't know you can even do this, but you couldn't go back to the beginning of the video while she was live streaming until she got a certain amount of likes. And if she got a certain amount of likes, she released the navigation function on the. I mean, that's brazen. I gotta respect that. So yeah, I'm gonna start doing stuff like that. Like just stop talking midstream. Go take a nap back there until the likes go up. Yeah, it's the thing. I didn't even know you could do that. I was like, wow, like where is that functionality? Shoot, what is a sellout in a universe of sellouts? We're not in a universe of sellouts. We're in a universe of buy-ins. Like a universe of sellouts would be an improvement than what we have now. We have a universe of buy-ins. What that means to sell out, you had to have a principle to begin with. So if we had a universe of sellouts, that would mean that we had a universe of people who at one point had a principle, even if they betrayed it. These people never form an initial principle anymore. So they're just buy-ins, which I think is worse than a sellout. No, no, he said buy-in, sell out, tomato, tomato. No, buy-in is way worse because a buy-in has nothing, no core values. They have no actual true self. To betray, that's the scariest kind of person. That person can sell you. That person can sell you up the river without a hint of their conscience being conflicted by it. You know, like even Judas had a conscience. He hung himself. You know what I'm saying? Even Judas was a sellout. Like he didn't even spend the 30 pieces of silver. A lot of people forget that part of the story. Like he felt so guilty, he just ended himself. You know, these people, they have no type of. They can throw you to the sharks and sleep like a baby. You know. Uh, But I mean, I get what you're saying, and that's a fair point. I want to talk about DEI. I'm trying not to meander so much. I'm trying to get in and get out. Keep hitting the likes, and also share. Like share, share, share. Like why don't people share? Like we should have more followers by now, man. Like people act like what we talk about is like a smoke signal or some kind of weird code. People be afraid to share the podcast with people. I don't know. I don't think what we say is that crazy, but I talk to people and they're like, "Yeah, I really like your podcast, but I need to find a good episode to share with my friends and family because I don't want to, get in trouble." I'm like, yo, what do we be talking about? Like, there's people talking about, um, like, how do we live in a world where like Andrew Tate is more shareable than Champagne Sharks? That's crazy. Like people will share the craziest shit, but they'll be acting like we're plotting to bomb something or something. Like, it's very bizarre. But there were a couple of articles about DI I thought were pretty interesting. But before I even go there, I wanted to talk about a tweet I saw first that I thought was very. I keep making the same mistake. I keep forgetting that I have to make a burner account. I'm gonna make a burner account for Twitter because I do this every time. I forget that there's no shareability anymore with sorry, X. Elon kind of locked it all down. So if you don't have an account, even if it's a burner account, you can't actually see it. Okay, so I lost the tweet anyway, but forget about that. Let's go to the articles because the articles are actually more important anyway. I just wanted the tweet to kind of frame the article. I'll say what the tweet basically said. Somebody was talking about how you know the good days that were coming with the DEI stuff is now gone. It was like a false promise, and um it's not gonna happen anymore, and the person was kind of lamenting that the DEI scene, diversity, equity, inclusion, was collapsing, and that get ready for the new world that were coming. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, what new world are you talking about? Like a new world where you can't just emotionally blackmail and extort white people and corporations into giving you make work jobs. Like DEI jobs, a lot of them, in theory, I don't think they're bad, but in honesty, a lot of them are kind of like no-show jobs that the mafia used to make for people at construction sites. Like it's a make work job. It's something. It's jobs that you had to give a certain uh demographic, and this demographic is kind of a mafia in and of themselves. Because what they're doing is extortion. You have to give people and their friends quote unquote jobs and put them on the payroll, or it's kind of like, hey, nice business you got going on here. It'd be a shame if someone canceled it. Like that's basically what they be doing. And I found the tweet. I'm gonna pull it up, but again, because I don't have an account, I can't actually pull up the replies and everything. And the replies, I think, are where magic really happens. Let me pull it up right now. And the thing that I always tell people, right, is when you have a hustle and you get like a good little undeserved gift of a hustle, milk it. Do what you can with it, but that understand that it's the clock is ticking on it. Like the problem with a lot of these people is that they get some kind of hustle going, and they try to treat the hustle like it's the new normal, like it's permanent. They don't sock the money away. They start counting future money. They start making purchases. They start planning a life around a windfall, that they should just be happy that they found people willing to pay them to do nothing. Like somehow they parlayed the death of poor black people at the hands of cops into uh, C-suite jobs at corporations, and because so many places were afraid of being called racist, and you should have known this wasn't gonna last forever. If they're gonna pay you, take the money, but be ready to for it to drop out at any moment, and be grateful for every day you got to milk it. Like don't start banking on it like a new normal. Don't start thinking of it as like this. Like, some of these jobs were paying insane. I was finding out some of them paying like 250,000 and all this stuff. And I think I find so interesting is no one really asks what these jobs accomplish. So this was at DEI is a rep. Hope you all are ready for the new world. And it's like, what new world? What was DEI preventing? Like, can you name me a single success that DEI got to regular black people? Like, the only black people DEI helped are black people with DEI jobs and their friends that they got to hire. That's about it. But I mean, the people who they took the spotlight from and whose plight they used to get themselves these jobs, none of that trickled down to them. What these type of bourgeois blacks do. They do what I call trickle up activism. The problem starts at the bottom, and then they get involved, and then the benefits and the restitution and the justice trickles up until the conversation ends with Oscars so white. Like, the victory laps they take are things like Oscars so white, where like rich black people who are famous get awards that allow them to make even more money and things like that. Those are the victory laps, and DEI jobs, and a single row on every streamer that says celebrate Black History Month or celebrate uh, Black Lives Mattering. So now there's a black row on every streamer to make the black movies easy to find. That's what George Floyd and Breonna Taylor died for. So yeah, I mean, who's the y'all here? Is the y'all basically the people who were paying their mortgage off of these jobs? Like, and if you ever saw the replies here, it was just full of people like, I guess they didn't really care about black people, and it's like, well, of course they didn't care because they hired y'all. If they if they care, they'd actually do something that actually helps black people. Like, them firing you isn't proof they don't care. Them hiring you as a solution to a whole different problem is the proof they didn't care. Just like you don't care, which is why you were hired, because you're not actually gonna change anything. So yeah, so the replies to this, if you were to able to log into Twitter, was yeah, they forget the grift thing. That's a good point. But you know what they do? Like, they lie so much, they start actually believing their own bullshit. Like, you ever have that happen? I remember one time I lied to a teacher about losing my assignment, and I got so cornered into the lie that I actually, on some level, started believing. I got like indignant. Uh, I'll never forget this. That's the first time I actually experienced. Yeah. So corporations' DEI jobs are to racial justice, what carbon credits are to climate change. Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. Oof. But I mean, it is what it is. Uh, I'm gonna pull up the articles real quick so y'all can see them. But it was these articles that when they came out, everybody was talking about it apparently on Twitter, and it was sent to me. And let me show you now. And I don't know, every DEI department has a white lady with no top lip. I have no idea why that is. There's always got to be somebody with no top lip in a DEI department. It's it's a given. I don't know if it's planned or if it's a coincidence or what, but it never fails. Let me pull it up now. And hit the likes, comment, share, subscribe, hit the super chats. Everything helps. And follow. Like, we hit the 3,000 mark, and then 2 people unfollowed. I don't know who y'all are, but come back and also fuck y'all. But yeah, so now we're like at right under 3,000 again. I just like that nice round 3,000 number. So anyway, the rise and fall of the chief diversity officer. Diversity executives hit the exits as the company provided priority shift. "Quote unquote, everything is a battle." 2 years ago, chief diversity officers were some of the hottest hires in executive ranks. Now they increasingly feel left out in the cold. Companies including Netflix, Disney, and Warner Bros. Discovery have recently said that high-profile diversity, equity, and inclusion executives will be leaving their jobs. They've been showing these people the door. And I think something that kind of changed too is David Zaslav over at Discovery Warner and a bunch of other people, actually Warner Discovery, it's become increasingly common to call these people's bluffs. You know, it's kind of like if the mafia person extorting you, you finally said, "I'm not going to pay you," and then nothing happened. And not only would you get bold, but a lot of other people watching will be like, "Wait a minute, maybe I could not pay either. I always thought they're going to break my legs." And that's kind of what happened. First, the recession happened, so they can't waste money anymore. Like they have more important things. This stuff was possible because they were floating in uh, what we called in the podcast zilch, zero interest loan cultural heaven. It was the age of easy money, and they could afford to waste money on things that were like prestige additions to the company, things that were public relations things. And now they have to trim the fat everywhere they can. But on top of that, they were kind of scared of the power these people had because they can make a lot of noise online. But it's become increasingly obvious if you can weather the noise, you can survive. They don't really have the power they say they do. All they can do is make people tweet at you. They don't really spend money on anything. Um, they don't really boycott anything that they like because they have the guts to. They're too addicted to consumerism and to mindless entertainment and social media to boycott anything. That's why they constantly harass Warner Brothers to not include J.K. Rowling and stuff because they want to be protected from themselves. They know that they can't not watch a Harry Potter anything or buy a Harry Potter something. Um, they're just these children that have to satisfy their impulses. So they want Warner Brothers to protect them from the consequences of their own impulsiveness. They want Warner Brothers to promise them, "Hey, you're not going to have to see J.K. Rowling, and you're not going to worry about your money going into her pocket. We're going to block her out and minimize her as a thing." And all they had to do was just not watch. I mean, you've read the books; they're done. Nothing she makes is gonna match those things. It's all just gravy now. No one's gonna take those memories for you. Like, just move on. You don't need the umpteenth reunion or whatever. You can just reread those books, and she won't make any money off of them. Uh, but there's that FOMO. They can't let it go. So, um, I mean, that's more proof. That's another example of how they realize they can call people's bluffs. They made a new Harry Potter game. These people made a bunch of noise, but the thing was highly rated. A bunch of the same people complaining bought it and bitched, and it was a huge financial success. And then David Zaslav realized, hey, I'm gonna make a new 10-year Harry Potter show, and he's still around. There's no backlash to him from it. So yeah, I think that's what made him realize, let's just start firing these people. Like nothing is gonna happen. Thousands of diversity-focused workers, thousands, and there aren't that many of them in the world, have been laid off since last year. And some companies are scaling back racial justice commitments. Just checking something real quick. Diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI jobs were put in the crosshairs after many companies started re-examining their executive ranks during the tech sector's shakeout last fall. Some diversity officers say their work is facing additional scrutiny since the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in college admissions and companies brace for potential legal challenges. DEI work has also become a political target. There's a combination of grief, being very tired. They just love being tired. We joked about that before. Always tired. Um, and being in some cases overwhelmed. So said Miriam Warren, chief diversity officer for Yelp, of the challenges facing executives in the field. Warren says the fear that company commitments are imperiled fuel her and others to feel, quote, more committed to the work than ever, unquote. Yelp's DEI budget has grown for the past 5 years. Notice the one thing they never mention is tangible things they've done. They never bring that up in these speeches. Just how hurt everyone's gonna be when they're not there anymore. But no one knows what exactly the average black person in the street's gonna lose from them not being there. In interviews, current and former chief diversity officers said company executives at the time didn't want to change hiring and promotion processes, despite initially telling CDOs they were hired to improve the talent pipeline. The Quick About Face shows company enthusiasm for diversity initiatives hasn't always proved durable, leaving some diversity officers now questioning their career path. In the wake of George Floyd's murder in police custody in May 2020, companies scrambled to hire chief diversity officers. What sense does that make? Like picture like that happened in any other anything. Like due to the plight of Cubans dying on boats in the sea, and because Miami turned them away at the border and had to go back in rafts. So, in the 80s, we decided to hire some Ivy League educated Cuban executives. Like it just makes no sense. It just sometimes I feel like there's just certain things that only seem to like apply to some groups. Like I feel like only with black people is that really kind of um happen. Maybe it happens with other people and I miss it. But I feel like when immigration isn't in the news, is in the news, and what's happening at the border, or like Muslims being having a travel ban or something, we don't hear about, hey, we just hired a bunch of Muslim executives, or we just hired a bunch of Latinx. It's maybe I just notice it more black people because that's what I look at. But yeah, I totally believe that the political climate is secondary to rising interest rates because this anti woke stuff has always been there since the Trump era. So if the politics to the Trump era wasn't killing this stuff, I doubt the politics is killing it now. I think not having to care about profits allowed people to ignore the culture war stuff, but now they actually care. Um, yeah. So back to this article. Nope, I lost the article. I have like a million tabs open. Oh yeah, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Nope, that's still not it. Here it is. Okay. Let me see if there's anything worth talking about here. Yeah. Once mostly tasked with HR matters, today's diversity leaders are expected to weigh on new product development, marketing efforts, and current events that have an impact on how workers and consumers are feeling. Warren and other CEOs said the expanded remit is playing out in a politically divided environment where corporate diversity efforts are the subject of frequent social media firestorm. And I don't really have pity for you because a lot of your job is created by social media firestorms. Like you guys have gotten burned by the monster that you created. A lot of the whole social justice scene, the whole um, ecosystem that these guys weaponize to get these jobs, they made a monster that now that Elon is in charge of it and not Jack, who's basically on their side. Now they're complaining that the monster they created. This is kind of similar to happening with people like Lizzo and stuff. Like um, this whole thing about believe victims no matter what, and you're guilty until proven innocent. But also, even after proven innocent, like it's starting to bite uh, the same people who were part of that scene. Um, yeah. So here's the thing that doesn't really get talked about in all this stuff, right? At the end of the day, they're a corporation. I don't know at which point left leaning people became the people who believed in corporations and mainstream and and big institutions as being the change agents, as having some type of moral superiority. It used to be that that was what conservatives believed. Like they believed that corporations existed to serve them, that institutions and the culture and the mainstream culture was made to serve them, and liberals and the left used to be counterculture. They used to be the ones that made independent movies. Now conservatives do that, like with that those Christian movies and that Freedom whatever movie. Uh, all the liberals now are trying to use Marvel and Star Wars and big studio stuff at Disney to push progressivism and are deathly afraid to do anything entrepreneurial, and it's conservatives doing all that stuff now. All the independent comics and crowdfunded, grass-fed, grassroots comics are all done by conservatives. The music, a lot of independent music now is conservative and libertarian and all that stuff. Like the ones that kind of sound like punkish and everything, and yeah, at some point liberals just became bought into all the institutions, but the problem is they've bought into it where they actually think the institutions are their friends, and they actually start believing that they think that these corporations seriously hired them to be their conscience, and that they view these issues more important than they view profits. But these people stay hired by being profitable. If a CEO is not being profitable, he can't go to his board of directors and say, "Hey, uh, the stock prices are in the toilet, and the stock prices are how all of us are gonna get rich. The stock price staying up, it's in the toilet. But guess what? Um, I've learned about my privilege. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? Learn about your privilege on the unemployment line. Beat it. What the fuck I care if you learn about your privilege? Like, if you are making the stock price fly through the roof and we're all getting rich, then hey, I'm in a good mood. I'll sit down and listen to you talk about how you learn about your privileges all day long. It's just icing on the cake. I'm drunk off of the extra zeros in my bank account, But yeah, these it's just so strange. These people actually believe these corporations are their friends, are like their religious priests, their confessor, their patron, their mentor, their politician. They have more faith in the corporate overlords than they actually have in their politicians. Like these people, if you tell them, "Hey, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden unless he promises tangibles," uh, they'll be like, "Hey, it's not fair to expect anything from a politician." But then they'll be like, "Yeah, Disney, I expected you to change the world." Like to them, it's actually more normal to ask a corporation for the stuff you're supposed to ask a politician for. That's how bizarre they've become. It's the most bizarre, but these are the most backwards. I've never understand how we got the current class of liberals we have. They're the absolute worst. It's the worst era of liberals I've ever uh seen. Yeah, Gucci is the change agent. Yes, exactly how these people think, and they just get mad at people for being. It's like the scorpion, the fraud. They get mad at the scorpion for being a scorpion. It's crazy. We're screwed. These are people fighting for our rights, and I go in on them a lot because I get frustrated with them because you know they're the best chance of, sadly, anything good happening, and they're just totally just high off the smell of their own farts and just way too bought in and clueless. They have no idea how the world works at all. It's nuts. Um, so going back to so here's the problem. They actually think that the corporation is supposed to kamikaze dive in the profits and sacrifice profitability to please them, and because they really think that they were hired to be these people's salvation, to save their souls and make sure that they get into woke heaven, and that they learn about the privilege and learn to be better people and whatever. And yeah, a corporation's job is to make profits at the end of the day. Everything is secondary to that. And they were able to act like it didn't matter, and they just started behaving like they didn't care about profits because they were so drunk on easy money, and they were all following this Silicon Valley strategy that now they can't follow anymore. It drove them into the ground. So I mean, this goes on and on. I'm not gonna keep going on about the article. If you want to read more about the article, you can click the link. I'm gonna jump to the next article. And this is the next article. No one is happy about diversity efforts at work. The Supreme Court's decision to eliminate affirmative action hits workplaces as diversity initiatives face pressure from supporters and skeptics. Stop being so woke. Written by the same person, I think. Interesting. She's definitely beating this drum. She's on this beat. Well before the last week's Supreme Court decision on affirmative action, tension had been building in workplaces across the country over efforts to hire, retain, and advance diverse workers. Companies are striving to demonstrate a commitment to minority employee success without being seen as limiting opportunities forever. Caught in the middle are human resources leaders like Sarah Sharp, a vice president of human resources at Clayton's, who says she is working to promote overall fairness in hiring, an approach that helps underrepresented workers without, she hopes, alienating others. There are people who say, I wish we were more diverse. And I've also seen people say, stop being so woke. Now, here's one of the problems with this supposed catch 22. A big problem that people do is they do kind of a Mott and Bailey or a bait and switch where they conflate wokeness with just progressivism in general. And wokeness isn't just being progressive, wokeness is being progressive in a very specific modern way that is very kind of toxic and off-putting and in my opinion counterproductive. So like what people will say is like, oh, so you say you hate wokeness, well, I guess you would have hated Martin Luther King. But these people, if Martin Luther King was alive, they would have hated Martin Luther King because he would not behave like them. Like what they do is they act a certain way and they advocate for a certain type of progressive person. Like they don't even like other types of progressive people. They only want people who behave like them or their friends or in their tribes and behave in the way that they behave, like social media witch hunts, cancellations, um focusing on representation over material uh realities and all this stuff. But then when you come for them, then they do a bait and switch and they're like, oh, so you just hate anti-racism, or you just hate anyone who's a feminist or whatever. And to be fair, a lot of the anti-woke people really do just hate anything that is progressive, whether it's woke or just old school progressive and focus on material reality. But the truth is also there's a lot of people who aren't racist, sexist, or homophobic or whatever, but who just hate um this new wokeness. And they also share these marginalized identities. And they always have to kind of minimize the existence of those people because it hurts the narrative. So what she's saying is, as showing some kind of bind that she's in, I really wish we were more diverse. And I've also seen people say, stop being so woke. But the truth is, you can be more diverse without being woke. And ironically, being woke, I think, actually doesn't lead to a lot of diversity because it leads to black people, white people, Latino people, gay people, trans people who are superficially diverse, but actually think more alike than what you had before. Like it's actually more of a hive mind, in my experience, more of a dogmatic, um, unflinching, sacrilegious to ever disagree agree with groupthink than what they replaced. Even if what they replaced before was like there's actually less diversity of thought. Um, and political viewpoints and opinions than before. Sam Adler-Bell tried to formulate a definition of woke, and so did um, so did Freddie deBoer, and they both came up with pretty good definitions of woke. And their definitions of woke try to specifically capture the very specific way of being progressive that these people embody, and people kept pushing back against any attempt by their enemies or their perceived enemies to define wokeness. So what they always keep doing is that's not wokeness. That's not wokeness. Can you define what wokeness is? They challenge their enemies to define what wokeness is. But if you ask them, well, you're the one who are acting this way. If we can't call it woke, what should we call it? And they don't want to tell you what to call them, because if they admit that they're a specific type of person, a specific type of progressive, once you can name them and once you can define them, now you can fight them. They have to kind of hide how they act among the general umbrella terms of anti-racism, feminism, LGBTQ rights, or whatever, because that makes them able to kind of hide among a crowd. You know what I mean? So I must share something real quick. Just give me a second. So Freddie deBoer, who is a person who can be problematic. Just because I think somebody's right on something doesn't mean I agree with everything they say. So if you don't like Freddie deBoer, don't just put that aside, because I think he's right about this thing. He says, "Please just fucking tell me what term I'm allowed to use for the sweeping social and political changes you demand. You don't get to insist that no one talks about your political project, and it's weak and pathetic that you think you do." So he has this tweet by Adam Silver, and he goes, "Part of the utility that of this kind of use of woke is that it expresses sentiments that people using it would be uncomfortable articulating directly, which is why anyone getting a question like this should simply respond by asking them to explain what they mean." So basically, anyone who says woke, you're supposed to ask them, what do you mean by woke? But then anything they say, you then say, that's not what wokeness is. And this is a game that you play where you can't let them define you. And then a lot of different people do similar things, right? So he goes, so Freddie deBoer says, "I beg you to read anything else I've written other than this piece, I beg you. You know, personally, I've been achingly specific about my critique of social justice politics, but fine. No woke, it's a dog whistle for racism. Fine. The term dog whistle is a way for people to simply impute attitudes you don't hold on to you to make it easier to dismiss criticism, for the record. But the same people say there's no such thing as political correctness, and they also say identity politics is a bigoted term. So I'm kind of at a loss. Although they propose sweeping changes to K to 12 curricula, but you can't call it CRT. But it is true. That's not CRT. We've talked about it in the podcast. CRT is something specific. But he is right that even though they'll tell you rightfully that what Christopher Rufo and Ron DeSantis are attacking is not accurately called CRT, they won't let it be named anything else. Like they won't tell you the proper thing to call it, because it's part of the trick that they use, right? So he is wrong about that. Um, and nobody ever advocated for defunding the police. And if they did, it didn't actually mean defunding the police. Seems to be real resistance to simple, comprehensible terms around here. Serwer is a guy who constantly demands that he and his ally be allowed to do politics on easy mode, but he's just part of a broader communal rejection of basic self definition and comprehensible terms for this political tendency. And if you say things they don't like, they might try to beat you up, emphasis on try. And for the record, I don't agree with a lot of what he's saying here. I think it is actually true that what was being attacked was not CRT. I think that a lot of stuff is not true, but I do think he's right that the people who are pushing this stuff don't want to argue in good faith. And I think, ironically, it actually kind of hurts their political project a lot because it becomes this very vague, amorphous thing, right? If you ask these people, are you part of a social revolution? They'll loudly tell you yes. Yes, they are. They're going to shake society at its very foundations. Well, okay, then what do I call your movement? You reject every name that organically develops. I'll use the name you pick, but you have to actually pick one. So I agree with that. You can't just say you can't call us woke. That's a dog whistle. That's a racist term. But you are not allowed to have any other name for them. You just have to call them, general liberals, general anti-racist, general whatever, which I think is messed up because it makes them become the face of feminism, of anti-racism, of LGBTQ rights to the exclusion of all the people in those groups who were doing activism before them and were doing a tangible, material, realities focused type of activism that I think is actually better. They end up taking over all these movements by their stubborn refusal to acknowledge that they're actually a subgroup within the left and liberalism. He says, you can't just bitch on Twitter every time someone tries to describe your political cohort, which, again, you yourself says intends to change the world. Name yourself or you will be named. The basic stance of the social justice set for a long time now has been that they are 100% exempt from ordinary politics. Black Lives Matter proponents have spent a year and a half acting as if their demand for justice is so transcendentally obviously correct that you don't have to care about politics. When someone like David Shore gently says that they do, in fact, have to care about politics, and points out that they've accomplished nothing, they attack him rather than do the work of making their positions popular. Well, sooner or later, guys, you have to actually give a shit about what people who aren't part of your movement think. Sorry, that's life. The universe is indifferent to your demand for justice and will remain so until you bother to change minds, to try to change minds. Nobody gives you what you want. That's not how it works. Do politics. Think and speak strategically. Be disciplined. Work harder. And for fuck's sake, give me a simple term to use to address you. Please, because right now it sure looks like you don't want to be named because you don't want to be criticized. Edit. I might not have underlined this point enough. I sincerely am asking for a better term and would happily use one if offered. If woke, political correctness, identity politics, etc., are inflammatory terms, I'd be happy to substitute something that's not. But surely something is happening in our politics, and we have to be able to talk about it. So I'm asking for a name. So that got a lot of heat and a lot of firestorm on Twitter, but it didn't work because at the end of the day, no one took up his challenge of giving a name for and again, there are a lot of problems in what he says. So I want to make clear that I don't support the whole thing. I think he is wrong in several of his premises, but I do think that the opposition hurts the case by arguing in bad faith the way they do, by playing these weird word games. And I think it allows people like him to win more hearts and minds to his anti-woke side than they're able to win hearts and minds outside of their tribe, you know? Um, so he had another article later that I think was actually stronger and better. and this one was like 2 years later. It was a couple months ago. Of course, you know what woke means. I'd rather use any other term at this point, but can we get real, please? And he says, as I've said many times, I don't like using the term woke myself, not without qualification or quotation marks. It's too much of a culture war pinball and now deemed too pejorative to be useful. I much prefer the term social justice politics to refer to the school of politics that is typically referred to as woke, out of a desire to be neutral in terminology. However, there is such a school of politics. It's absurd that so many people pretend not to know what woke means. And the problem can be easily solved if people who support woke politics would adopt a name for others to use. No to woke, no to identity politics, no to political correctness. Fine, pick something. The fact that they steadfastly refuse to do so is a function of their feeling that they shouldn't have to do politics like everyone else, but they do. And the resistance to doing politics is why, 3 years after the supposed reckoning, nothing has really changed. And I think he's right about that. The sheer amorphousness and game playing they do, it enables um, the extortion, the emotional blackmail to happen, but it kills the ability for accountability. Like the leaderlessness and the lack of tangible politics and mechanisms and material analysis is great for creating firestorms, is great for creating buzz, for mobilizing, but it's bad for actual tangible organizing. And all these things eventually hit a wall. And when the smoke clears, you just basically have a bunch of people fired from DEI jobs and people at Black Lives Matter with mansions, but nothing tangible actually accomplished. If there's no such thing as the social justice politics movement, who made the protests and unrest of 2020 happen? The fucking Democrats? The conceit is that woke has even shaggier or vaguer boundaries than liberal, fascist, conservative, or moderate. And I just don't think that's true. Woke or wokeness refers to a school of social and cultural liberalism that has become the dominant discourse in left of center spaces in American intellectual life. It reflects trends and fashions that emerged over time from left activist and academic spaces that became mainstream, indeed hegemonic, among American progressives in the 2010s. Wokeness centers, quote, the political is personal, unquote, at the heart of all politics and treats political action as inherently a matter of personal moral hygiene. Woke isn't something you do, it's something you are. Correspondingly, all of politics can be decomposed down to the right thoughts and right utterances of enlightened people. Persuasion and compromise are contrary to this vision of moral hygiene and thus are deprecated. Correct thoughts are enforced through a system of mutual surveillance, one which takes advantage of the affordances of internet technology to surveil and then punish. Since politics is not a matter of arriving at the least bad alternative through an adversarial process, but rather a matter of understanding and inhabiting an elevated moral station, there is no crisis of conscience or necessary evil. Woke is defined by several consistent attitudes. Woke is academic. The terminology of woke politics and academic terminology, which is unsurprising given its origins in humanities departments of elite universities. So civil rights are out, anti-racism is in, community is out, intersectionality is in, equality is out, equity is in, homelessness is out, unhoused is in, sexism is out, misogyny is in, advantage is out, privilege is in. Whenever there's an opportunity to introduce an alternative concept that has been rung through academia's weird machinery, that opportunity is taken. This has the advantage of making political engagement available only to a priestly caste that has enjoyed the benefits of elite university education. Like all political movements, the woke political movement is captured by the urge to occupy elevated status within it. And I think this is very true. Like, there's very much a membership jargon that is involved in this type of politics. Immaterial. Woke politics are overwhelmingly concerned with the linguistic, the symbolic, and the emotional to the detriment of the material, the economic, and the real. Woke politics are famously obsessive about language, developing literal language policies that are endlessly long and exacting. Utterances are mined for political offense with pitiless focus, such that statements that were entirely anodyne a few years ago become unspeakable today. Being politically pure is seen as a matter of speaking correctly rather than acting morally. The woke fixation on language and symbol makes sense when you realize the developers of the ideology are almost entirely people whose profession involves the immaterial and symbolic. Professors, writers, reporters, artists, pundits. I think this article is much better than the last one, to be honest. They retreat to the linguistic because they feel that words are their only source of power. Consider two recent events: the Academy Awards giving Oscars to many people of color, and Michigan repealing its right to work law. The latter will have vastly greater positive consequences for actually existing American people of color than the former, and yet the former has been vastly better publicized. This is a direct consequence of the incentive structure of woke politics. Structural in analysis, individual in action. The woke perspective is one that tends to see the world's problems as structural in nature rather than product of individual actors' actions. Sometimes the problems are misdiagnosed or exaggerated, but a structural focus is beneficial. Curiously, though, the woke approaches to solutions to problems is relentlessly individualistic, which I think is true. They point out structural causes of problems, but the solutions are individualistic. Give people DEI jobs, give people Oscars, um, give people representation, and um, elevate certain people, and do all these things that help a certain class of people. So you'll hear all the structural causes to why there's a George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but the solutions will be giving jobs to a bunch of um, well-educated, middle class and up individuals in DEI departments. The structural problems, such as racism, are represented as fundamentally combated with individual moral correctness. The only real political project is a struggle against the self. The only real political victory is the mastery of one's thoughts. Check your privilege. The distinction between the effective political actor and the morally hygienic thinker is collapsed. You combat homophobia by being gay affirming. You combat misogyny by respecting women. You combat all social ills by relentlessly fixating on your own position in society and feeling bad about it. Check your privilege. Nothing political can escape the gravity of personal psychodrama, and no solution exists but cleansing the self. Emotionalist. Emotionalist rather than emotional, meaning not necessarily inappropriately emotional, but concerned fundamentally with emotions as the currency of politics. In woke circles, political problems are regularly diagnosed as a matter of the wrong emotions being inspired in someone. Someone feeling invalid is no longer an irrelevant matter of personal psychology best left to a therapist, but instead a political problem to be solved. And anyone who provoked that feeling is someone who has committed a political crime, no matter the context or pretext. And this is something we say in the podcast a lot, that politics now is focused on affirmation of certain people and denigration of your enemies. So if you see this whole desirability politics, for example, and the colorism stuff, and the um, who's made to feel bad about themselves, that's the focus of politics now. And how can you make certain people not feel bad about themselves? How can you make people feel quote unquote seen? Um, I don't want to read all this because it's getting long. Fatalistic, woke politics tends toward extreme fatalism regarding solutions and the possibility of gradual positive political change. Institutions are all corrupt and bigoted, so institutions cannot prompt change. Well, unless they're corporations that can give people jobs, then suddenly Disney can somehow create change with the Little Mermaid. But even that's really a individualistic solution because they're only hiring one woman to headline the movie. So it goes back to the whole idea that all solutions are individualistic. Most people are irredeemably racist, and so the masses cannot create a just society. Constructive police reform is inherently and irrevocably impossible, so the only response to police violence is police abolition, no matter that we can't actually achieve police abolition and so forth. And I can think of the point of it. I'm going to kind of collapse the rest of this. Insistent that all political questions are easy. Woke people speak and act as though there are no hard political questions and no such thing as moral dilemma. Everything is obvious if you've only done the reading and done the work, which woke people assure you they did a long time ago. If you don't know what the right thing to do or say is only because you aren't really dedicated. If you think you've hit upon a real dilemma of conflicting but legitimate concerns, you're simply lacking education and wisdom. Um, Google is your friend. That's something I like to say, or um, I'm not here to educate you. Check Google. That's what they always say. But then, if you check Google and find data they don't like, then that's a problem too. It's funny actually that you don't know the exact right thing to think right now. I'm actually laughing. 7. Possessive belief in the superior virtue of the oppressed. And the eighth one is a joke. I'm not going to bother to read that one. I could go on, and some will disagree with this or that, but whether you think this is an accurate portrayal of the kind of politics that became dominant in progressive circles in the last 10 to 12 years, something has happened. Something changed. Of course, something changed. I find it so bizarre that people still insist that nothing has changed in progressive discourse or politics in that period. Go back and read some of the stuff that's getting published in liberal outlets in 2010 and tell me it's the same. Come on, give me a break. Grow up. I'd rather woke politics win conservatism, but I'd rather have a friendly, forgiving, plain spoken, big tent civil libertarian socialist mass movement personally. The trouble is, there is only woke and anti woke. There is no escape. Now, I think whether you agree with his definition or not, at least making an attempt to define the thing, and he's willing to acknowledge that what we call wokeness is not general anti-racism that has existed for the past 50 years. It's not the general gay rights that existed for the past 50 years. It's not the general feminism that existed for like the past 100 years. It's a very new, recent, and hyper-specific way of practicing liberal progressive politics, which takes me back to the DEI article I just said, where the woman is saying, yeah, people want us to increase diversity, but they also say, don't be woke. It's impossible, and that's the game that gets played. Like, the only choice is woke or anti woke, but the game she has to play is to pretend that there's no such thing as wokeness that's very specific and different than general anti-racism or whatever, because if they allow it to be admitted and conceded that they're just a recent and specific on the rise form of liberalism, then people can start making the decision, well, what if we still act anti-racist? What if we still pursue diversity? What if we still pursue rights for marginalized groups, but we just don't do it the way this group does it? We exile this group from leading the conversation. And the easy way for them not to lose their culturally dominant position in left and liberal circles is to deny that they even exist. And it goes back to that devil's advocate um, quote from that movie. Remember, the biggest trick that the devil played was to convince the world that he didn't exist. And I feel like that applies to what people have been forced to call wokeness. The biggest trick that they pull is to pretend that they don't actually exist. And by refusing to name themselves or let themselves be named or actually give a positive definition for themselves, all they do is just refute any definition you try to give. They're playing the game of denying they exist. And if they don't exist, then you can't target and fight them because now they're just a boogeyman. Okay, if people engage in the politics that Freddie is talking about and just started calling themselves woke, okay, he wouldn't be happy and move on. But how does that become a reason not to do it? Like, why give him the ammunition? I mean, why becomes the answer? To just keep not defining it because it's gotten us no results. I think I mean, do you disagree with his claim that they've accomplished nothing? Like, I don't care if he follows through on his promise. If they do what he says, first off, we'll have better conversations about liberal and leftist politics. As people will be showing their hands and we'll actually be able to have real conversations. And number two, if he doesn't live up to his word, Now you can call him out on it. If you tell him, but I don't see why he wouldn't just call him whatever they want to be called, because he'd only have to play that game if they're so good and smart and correct that he has to play that game. But honestly, there's so many ways to debunk and make these people look stupid that I think honestly he's smart enough. And I don't like the guy as politics in general, but I'll be honest. I think he can easily use whatever name they call themselves, use that name, and still pretty much shred them uh, in debate because they're not very good at honest debate. Like I don't see what would be in it for him to insist on calling them something that they're not, because I still think he can. I mean, just right there in that whole article I just read, he gave an 8-point list dissecting what he thinks is wrong with them. That they focus on the structural, not the individual, and they do this, this, and this, and that. If he's able to list those 7 or 8 points and has a devastating attack, at what point? At that point, why does he care about insisting on calling them woke if they if he already promised that he wouldn't call them that if they gave him another name? Because first he'd give him the ammunition to focus on his broken promise and distract from his tangible argument. So he would be giving them a layup that would actually hurt and distract from his actual better ammunition. And if he did do it, just call him on it, and he'd lose a lot of So yeah, I pretty much don't care if he follows through on his promise to call them whatever they want to be called. A, because I think he would do it because his ability to argue in his position isn't so weak that he needs to stick to stupid word games, you know. But the other thing is, you know, I just think if he was to do that, just call him on it. Call him out as a hypocrite. I think it would help the other side. Um, but yeah, anyway, going back to that other article that I showed before that I was reading, that's where these things kind of get stuck. Um, there are people who say, "I wish we were more diverse," but also stop being woke. And the article keeps going on and on. But I think Freddie deBoer is right that as long as you focus on woke and anti woke, and you conflate wokeness with general liberalism, such that the only way to be anti racist or to be feminist or to be pro gay or to be pro trans is to draw your lot in with this crowd and their tactics, um, the left is screwed. Uh, we on the left actually need to fight these people more than the people on the right do, because honestly, they've been the best recruiting drive and the best membership drive that the right has ever had. I think the right actually needs these people to be the face of liberalism, the left, more than we actually do. Ironically enough, because without them as the face of the opposition, these people on the right would actually have to start arguing with actually smart people aimed at material solutions, like the same type of people on the left that the so-called woke actually try to suppress and silence on their own side and keep from being the face of movement politics. Um, this is the last. There's a third D.I article from the Wall Street Journal, but I don't know if I want to read it because it's basically just repeating the same as the first two. So I tell you what, the third article is in the comment section. They're all not the comment section. It's in the description. They're all from the same month, so You can go read it yourself. It's called Bidenomics and the Boom in DEI and ESG Jobs. And it talks about how these jobs grew. And it actually makes a comparison that a commenter made about how DEI jobs are very similar to carbon credits. It's kind of become its own little hustle. So yeah, I'm instead going to jump to another article, one that I think is actually more concise and in better faith than Freddie's one, because I think Freddie kind of leans a little more to being anti-identity politics, and this article is by Sam Adler-Bell, and I think it actually does a better attempt at defining wokeness. I think it actually succeeds better, and it's just an overall better article. And I'm going to load it up right now, and then we're going to end with that one. So I'm just reading the comments real quick. I'm just trying to think. If there's anything worth replying to right now. Anyway, let me get to the article. Unlearning the Language of Wokeness by Sam Adler-Bell. This one, New York Magazine. And this one I thought was very good. But again, he got attacked as transphobic, and he was told that he was endangering the lives of trans people with this article. And no one was actually willing to engage the actual content of the discussion. But he says, several nights ago, I shot up in my bed with the ringing in my ears and a crazy sense that the ceiling was getting closer and further away at the same time. I assumed I was having some kind of post-COVID neurological episode, or maybe, you know what? Skip that paragraph. It's unnecessary. Let's get one thing out of the way. This discourse sucks. "Quote unquote wokeness" may once have had a relatively stable meaning, signifying among 20th century black radicals and articles something like, quote, "staying wise to the persistence and insidiousness of white supremacy in American life," unquote. But now the term has been abused and stretched to a point of such ample unintelligibility that its mere appearance in text or speech reliably signals that an unclear or tendentious thought is about to be expressed, inducing in me at least a slack-jawed irritation that is phenomenologically not unlike having my ears boxed. It doesn't help that its most frequent invokers are so irritating. The pundits who inveigh against wokeness tend to fall into two categories. First, there are conservatives who oppose the goals of a more expansive liberatory agenda on principle, and for whom the wokeness is a conveniently pre-stigmatized shibboleth with which to launder their underlying disdain for a more egalitarian social order. And second, there are the popularists who believe the capture of liberal institutions by overtly left wing communicators is bad for the Democratic Party political outcomes. These latter pundits often conceal their disinterest, if not disdain, for the goal of the insurgent left behind a plea for strategic unanimity and compromise. And so the loudest critics of quote unquote wokeness are either A, reactionaries who would despise left wing values regardless of the idiom in which we express them, which I agree with, or B, liberals who have made such a fetish of electoral margins and campaign messaging that they don't recognize as legitimate those forms of political activity which are not reducible or in every instance conducive to the goal of democratic electoral gains. Those of us who believe in a more egalitarian racial and economic order and who doubt the Democratic Party is the only or best vehicle for achieving it have no particular reason to trust either of these factions. Their critiques of our political strategies are impossible to disentangle from the incompatibility of our political visions. Again, I totally agree. I wish it was in slightly plainer language. Like the advantage of Freddie's piece to me is that it's much more plain, and this is written at a higher reading level, which doesn't make it bad, but I think Freddie's is easier for the average person to instantly digest, even though I think this is an actual better article. That all being said, I want to suggest that the critique of wokeness may point to a real problem for socialists, feminists, and other radicals, one obscured by our disdain for his messengers and his motivation. This real problem is obscured because it overlaps at times with our opponent's tendentious complaints, so we dismiss it. To elucidate it further, I'm going to offer, God forgive me, another definition of wokeness, one which bears at least some resemblance to the way it is deployed in our jaundiced contemporary discourses. Here it is. And here's his definition of what people call wokeness now. Wokeness refers to the invocation of unintuitive and morally burdensome political norms and ideas in a manner which suggests that they are self evident. And to put that in plainer speak, he's basically saying that wokeness is to invoke a weird, hyper specific, counterintuitive set of norms, jargons, and values um, as politics, but also act like it should be obvious to everyone um, that these are the new normals. So basically, you can't understand good politics without them being the priestly caste to interpret it and educate you. But it should also be obvious, and you're a bigot and an asshole for not automatically getting it. So you need them to explain this stuff to you. So supposedly it's not obvious and evident. You need to pay these people. You need to promote these people. You need to put them in your DEI jobs. But if you don't instantly act like you get what they're saying and it's not intuitive to you, you're an evil person. And what that's called in abuser speak, that's called a double bind. A double bind is when you get put into a damned if you do, damned if you don't position. And it's something that people use to manipulate, abuse, and emotionally bully you. So I think it's actually a feature, not a bug. I don't think it's a mistake, but I think his definition is way simpler than Freddie's, even though I think Freddie's is, more specific. I think they're both right in their own ways, but I think this captures it perfectly. Like the double bind and the tool for emotional blackmail that's used. And I'm gonna leave it with that. I think that's a good place to stop it. And I think everything that you're saying, ISON info, is totally addressed in what he's saying. But I think the easiest way, see, you're pointing out the problem that he's talking about. Because you're saying, when I hear someone rail against woke, I don't take them seriously. Almost no one is using that term in a non-pejorative way. If anything, they mean identity politics and don't want to say, but that's totally what he says in the article. He says that it has a pejorative term, but what's the solution to that? The solution to that is give your own term for what you want, because identity politics is considered a pejorative term as well, which is what he pointed out. So you're criticizing him, but you're criticizing him by pointing out what he's already pointing out in the article. You're actually converging with him. He said in the article, and what you say is your reason for not doing it is that if we give him a term, so you're complaining here that you don't take people who rail against wokeness seriously because anyone who uses a term is in a non-pejorative way, but you also don't want to give him another term because you don't believe he's really going to use it. But so then what is the option? You don't give him another term, but if he says wokeness, he's automatically a bad guy. You're doing like the exact same thing that he's talking about. Um, so something somebody else said here, which I think is building on to what you're saying, is someone else said, I can't remember when the last time that worked, doing the hypocrisy gotcha. Or I think it's to say, Um, we shouldn't give people like Freddie deBoer an alternative term for woke because I already know he's not going to use it. Um, but if he keeps using the term woke or any other term, he's a bad guy because it's a pejorative. But I'm also not satisfied with the idea of giving him the other term for woke, letting him avoid using that term and calling him out for the hypocrisy. And the reason why that's a bad idea is because, like Jeffrey Corley says, I can't remember the last time it actually worked doing the hypocrisy gotcha. So you've kind of killed every avenue in a way that empowers Freddie deBoer's takedown of wokeness because those are very strong articles that he wrote. And you've kind of cut off every avenue of fighting those articles outside of doing exactly the behavior he called out. So basically, the only option left is to keep doing the exact behavior because you're saying you can't remember the last time it actually worked doing the hypocrisy gotcha. But what Freddie deBoer is doing in those articles is the hypocrisy gotcha. And that newsletter is wildly successful. And people like him are winning the culture war. So the last time the hypocrisy gotcha worked, I would say it's the Freddie deBoer because he is actually doing it himself. But I will also say this: the extent to which the hypocrisy gotcha doesn't work, I think it's still better than whatever we're doing now, which is I'm not going to define what wokeness is. I'm not going to let you define what wokeness is, but I'm going to keep doing something that everybody clearly sees is something new, specific, and alienating. Um, so it's like, yeah, I can't remember when the hypocrisy gotcha worked, but the hypocrisy gotcha I think is better than playing into Freddie deBoer's hands and consistently playing these transparently bad faith word games and moving the goalposts that everybody who's not already in the choir can see through, and that is the biggest recruiting tool I think for reactionaries right now. I will take the hypocrisy gotcha over this current game plan because I think it works way less. Nobody's is swayed by these particular games except for the people already in um, the so-called quote unquote woke. But also, like, why would you support not naming yourself? I, just because you don't want to admit that Freddie deBoer might be right about something. It just doesn't really work to me, you know? I mean, I don't know. If you have a better solution, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So, I mean, I read the whole article, so you basically but you can find it and read it yourself, but again, I'm not crazy about Freddie deBoer in general, but I do think that he touches on a lot of things that I think are tangible weaknesses in this group, and that I think if they're not addressed, as much as we don't like him, we're empowering him to look better in the debate and win more hearts and minds than the people who do actually want to practice good identity politics. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. It's about an hour and 19 minutes, a little longer than I wanted. I can't see the likes. I hope the likes have matched the amount of people who have been in here. And yeah, last chance to hit the likes, share, hit the super chats, whatever. But in the meantime, have a good evening. Read the articles that I've discussed for yourselves, and see what you think about it. But read them with an open mind, and tell me what you think. Like, because I'm open to disagreement or whatever, as long as it's well thought out and supported. So take care, everybody, everyone. Be good. We'll talk soon.